We finished up our third unit of class on civil law. And if you missed class, this is the review. Or if you were in class and you want to hear it again, well, here it is. And the first question is a compound question. What do torts encourage? 1. When do torts occur? 2. What do torts deal with? 3. Define what remedy means. 4. What are the 3 types of damages awarded for remedies? And I hope you remember when you have a compound question, slow down, break it into bite-sized chunks, and attack it one piece at a time. So to break this down, the first part, torts encourage people to behave correctly and to correct the errors when they're made. And there's this notion that everybody's worried about getting sued and everybody's trying to cover their backside so they don't get sued. I'm going to respectfully pose the question, is that a bad thing if everybody's keeping things safe so they don't get sued because they're keeping things safe? A little perspective for you. Now, the second part, torts occur when someone's rights have been violated in non-criminal ways. We're not looking for incarceration. We're looking for something besides that. Now, the third part, torts deal with whether someone made a mistake or did harm, and then evaluating to what extent. There's little mistakes, medium mistakes, and really big mistakes. Courts look at that. Now, the fourth part, remedy means to right the wrong the best way you can. Now, the fifth part, there's the damages that are compensatory, like lost wages or medical bills. I told you the story of my dog. My neighbor's dog attacked my dog. I gave my neighbor the vet bill. He paid the vet bill. We're good. That's compensatory. Now, punitive is a toughie. How do you quantify pain and suffering? Now, these punitive damages can be really big money depending on the extent of the pain and suffering. And then, not a super common outcome is a nominal situation where it's like a dollar settlement, but out of principle, you want to hear somebody say, I did wrong, and you're right, that kind of stuff. Now, 2 issues we didn't talk about very much in class would be specific performance. When you tell an organization or person, you need to do this to fix the issue. And then there's injunctions where you tell somebody, you have to stop doing this, and if you stop doing this, we're good. Okay, so that was question number 1. Now, question 2 is a lot shorter. What are the areas that are subject to strict liability torts at home? 1, business 2, municipalities 3. So at home, you have to be really careful when it comes to if you have a swimming pool. If somebody gets into your pool and drowns, that's a problem. A gun, if it's not in a safe and somebody gets a hold of your gun, you can be subject to this. Trampolines, people can get really injured on trampolines. And dogs. If your dog bites somebody, that's a problem. You really don't have a whole lot of legal defense when you have this. Now, when it comes to business and manufacturers, they have to keep their product safe. The product has to do what it says it's going to do. I told you the story in class about my Ford Escape. One of the areas of the engine wasn't working. Ford had to recall that vehicle, fix it because my engine didn't do what it was supposed to do. Also in a business, so for example, if I put super heavy things on the top shelf and somebody's reaching up for it and they pull a 50-pound bag on their head, that was not smart. If you notice, you go into a hardware store, the heavy stuff is on the ground, the light stuff is on the top because they're protecting themselves. And in terms of municipalities for cities, you have to keep the city safe. If you provide a city and you're not taking care of the citizens and you put them in unsafe situations, they can be subject to strict liability. Now, the third question is a rehashing of the Liebeck McDonald's case that we had a mock trial about. And the question is, what were the factors that determined the outcome? Now, this was a very sensationalized case when it took place in the 90s. However, there was merit to the case, and it's a good example of how tort laws alters the practices of people and businesses. So you look at today, there's cup holders in cars, wasn't super common back in the early 90s. The industry standard for coffee dropped from 185 degrees to about 140, 130. Companies put cream and sugar in the coffee now when you're in the drive-through lane. Now, the factors that determine the outcome, there were 700 plus claims against McDonald's in a 10-year span of time from people burning themselves. It was really hot. I told you the story in class. I formed a mouth guard when I was a sophomore in high school using McDonald's coffee. That is a true story. That's how hot it was. My wrestling coach knew it was that hot to do that. The severity of damage from something as innocuous as a cup of coffee. If you look at something like a cup of coffee should be a small, easy everyday thing. You have to be careful, even the small things, okay? And you could argue McDonald's didn't do that. Something as simple as a cup of coffee, they were really high risk. Now, the jury scaled down the initial damages to about a quarter what was initially asked for. So that demonstrates a real classic civil law where it's percentages. Roughly they said, McDonald's, you're about 25% responsible for this outcome. And Stella Liebeck, you are 75%. If you look at it like that, they asked for 2.6 million. They got about a quarter of that. So we basically rehashed the mock trial there. Now, the fourth case was the very first day of civil law. What steps the school took to prevent lawsuits? And remember our walk around the school, locked doors, fire extinguishers, exit doors, defibrillators, the smart pass to know where people are. We have security cameras. We have a maintenance department that puts salt down on the sidewalks, and they plow the parking lot, and that big yellow sign in the hallway for there was a spill to warn people. Also FERPA and HIPAA. I cannot talk about your personal business, and I cannot talk about your medical business. And believe me, as a teacher, we get told to be careful in these areas, as we should. All things that Clarenceville has done to prevent lawsuits. Now, the fifth question are the differences between criminal and civil law. And this is a quick list. I'll just read through this. Criminal law seeks to punish offenders for an offense, while civil law seeks to achieve a remedy. That's the difference. Now, criminal law cases are initiated by the state or a public prosecutor, while civil cases are initiated by an individual or a private party. Criminal law cases are decided by a judge or jury, while civil cases are usually decided by a judge. However, there are jury trials for civil law, but they're not as common as criminal law. Number 4, criminal law imposes penalties such as imprisonment, fine, community service. Civil law imposes remedies like compensations, injunctions, restitution, that sort of thing. Number 5, criminal law requires a higher standard of proof. You have to be guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, while civil law is a much lower standard of proof, preponderance of evidence. And number 6, criminal law provides legal protection such as the right to remain silent, that's the Fifth Amendment, the right to a fair trial, and the presumption of innocence, while civil law provides fewer legal protections. So those are the differences. Question 6, what are the 4 elements of negligence torts? What constitutes duty? How do you establish breach? How is causation determined? What factors do judges take in consideration when awarding damages? Well, I pretty much gave you the answer here. Duty, breach, causation, damages. Duty. What is reasonably expected of the person in their role and situation? So if I'm a teacher, it's different than if I'm a truck driver or if I'm a cook. Essentially, are you being reasonable? Are you doing what you're supposed to be doing? Breach. How bad is the mistake? What factors were involved in the failure of doing your duty? So I know my duty is to keep an eye on the class. However, if there was a huge fist fight out in the hallway and one of my students was getting hurt and I run out to save that kid and something happens in my classroom, that's a lot different if I stepped out to, drink coffee with my friends on the staff. Different kind of breach. Now, causation, when you look at the issue, what was the cause or causes of the negligence? You have to basically say, okay, this outcome happened. What was the cause or causes to make that? And then damages. Judges award damages based on how grievous the breach was, how badly the individual was harmed, and oftentimes it's in a percentage. Like, hey, you're this responsible, that kind of thing. Question 7, what are the 10 limits to the First Amendment provision of freedom of speech? Defamation, when you do something to harm a reputation of somebody, causing panic. Oh my God, there's a fire. We got to get out of here. Okay, you can't be doing that. That's not a prank. That's not funny. Fighting words. Hey, I'm going to punch you in the mouth. Oh yeah? Yeah. But okay, those you can't say that. Incitement to a crime. I can't tell somebody to commit a crime. Sedition is when you go against the country. Now, obscenity is a toughie, and there's a big, tough standard for that. But there are some things that I think the vast, vast, vast majority of people would say are obscene. Now, offensive is also a toughie, too, because what might offend one might not offend another. Establishment of religion. So for me as a public school teacher, I cannot, have Bible study in the middle of class, that kind of thing. Slander and libel. Slander is spoken, libel is written, and false advertising. So the First Amendment is not 100% freedom. There's limits to that. And some of these would be torts. If you cross a line here, those would be torts. Question 8, what are the 4 privacy torts and what are examples for each? So we have false light, public disclosure of private facts, appropriation for commercial gain, intrusion on an individual's affairs. So here's some examples, because you have to find examples. So there was a popular comedian in the 80s named Gallagher. His brother stole his act and toured and profited from his brother's name. So which one would that be? I'm thinking number 3. Hey, the entire front row of the law class wet their beds until they were 13. Well, I think that's probably a public disclosure of private facts. I don't think anybody wants to know that. Hey, I set up a secret wiretap in the English department's classroom to hear all the dirty dealings they engage in. Okay, I'm intruding in their individual affairs. And then, hey, Jimmy failed second grade 3 times. Read it in a CA60 file. Okay, so if you look at these examples, I want you to think about which one of these they fit into. Okay, so one more time, that would be commercial gain, that would be false light, that would be individual affairs, and that's private facts. Okay, yeah, I got that right. Hope you can do the same when you take the test. Okay, 2 more. Question 9. When do intentional torts occur? How would one defend him or herself against an intentional tort scenario? So an intentional tort occurs when someone makes a purposeful choice to act or fail to act in a certain way. Now, this act or omission causes harm, and the victim who is harmed experiences damages they can be compensated for. Now, some defenses, you could say consent, you agreed to be in this scenario. You said I did it out of self-defense. I was defending my property. Now, recapture of chattels, that's a weird one, where if somebody takes something from you and you tackle them and get it back, you're recapturing your stuff. Or assumption of risk to say, hey, listen, something bad happened, but hey, you assume the risk for doing that. So that was question 9. And the final question, why is civil law so lucrative for the attorneys who practice it? Well, there's something called a contingency fee. Now, the industry standard is 33%. So if you get $1 million settlement, you're getting $333,000. That's a good chunk of change. Now, number 2, civil law encompasses a lot of different areas, so there's likely always going to be plenty of clients if you can branch off. Civil law is a big umbrella. A lot of stuff fits under. You hear these ads, we don't get paid until you do. Well, that allows attorneys to cherry pick cases that they know are likely to win or for sure they're going to win. Now, in criminal law, you represent your client despite their circumstances. You have to take whomever, where civil law attorneys can pick and choose. And then number 4, civil law attorneys often target those with deep pockets. These are corporations that have a lot of money, and sometimes based on PR, they just want it to go away, and they'll take a settlement just to make the problem go away. So around Detroit, I know you've seen these 5 groups of people, and they're all civil attorneys. Some do criminal as well, but a lot of their bread and butter are in the realm of civil law. Okay, so I know that this video was a little longer than normal, but hopefully that fills you in, and I hope everybody has success on their test, and I appreciate you watching.